Well, Ray's podcast audience, the community that's built around this, we have a very special episode for you today because for the first time ever, I believe, Brent Grinna is stepping aside as host, bringing in his heir to the throne, Beebe here, president of EverTrue and previously co-founder of ThankView, to interview the one and only Brent Grinna. So Brent, how does this feel?
I have not been nervous. We've done almost 100 episodes, and for some reason, I'm a little nervous right now. So thanks for having me, JD.
You got it. Listen, it's the least I could do. I know the audience and the community has been clamoring to get to know Brent more. You've been the consummate host, introducing, as you mentioned, over 100 different great conversations with leaders in the higher ed advancement space. So today, it's my distinct pleasure to turn the tables on you so that our audience can get to know a little bit more about the man behind the voice and behind the company. So I want to start way back, bring me back to Postville, Iowa, although I've heard in other write-ups, you might have actually grown up in another town. It wasn't Postville.
That's right.
It was Frankville, near Frankville, Iowa.
Yeah, just a couple of miles west of Postville. That's right. And so you just want the quick life story. Yeah, I actually was, my mom and dad both grew up in Northeast Iowa on farms. And for whatever reason, after they got married, they decided to move to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which not a lot of people did in the late 70s in Northeast Iowa. And so I was actually born in Florida. When I was 18 months old, mom and dad decided to move not only back to Iowa, but back to the exact farm that my dad grew up on. And so that's where my brothers and I grew up, a 160-acre farm, pretty much the most quintessential Iowa surroundings you could imagine, cornfields as far as the eye could see. My nearest neighbor was about a mile away, and that was sort of our deal.
And you said you grew up with two brothers. Who are your brothers' names?
Right, yeah, so I'm the oldest of three. Brad is my middle brother, who currently lives in Denver, Colorado, and then Blaine is my youngest brother, who is in the Boston area here.
So you got three Bs.
That's right. My dad
three
said
B brothers.
He got to the B's in the baby book, and he was tired of going through the names, and so he just stopped there. That's the rumor. Well, as
JDBB, I think he made the right choice. That's the best letter of them all. And just because, again, there's photos that circulate of your younger days. You had some prize-winning pigs, 4-H pigs.
That's right. Yeah, we took pets to a whole new extreme on the farm. We had a cow named Charlie, and then we had a few different sets of pigs over the years. And one of my first kind of formative leadership experiences was in the 4-H club. And so I had the opportunity to show our pigs at the county fair. And we actually took the grand champion pen of 3 in Winneshiek County in 1995, which is pretty much, that's about as good as it gets.
I was going to say that's the Cadillac of pig contests.
People think it's about the blue ribbon, but it's not. It's actually the purple ribbons that you really want.
Yep, there you go. Well, now this is going to be a kind of a theme throughout. So just kind of showing my cards here. In those early days, in the Iowa days, were there any sort of mentors, whether it be perhaps jokingly in the pig game, but also just as you were growing up, any mentors that you sought out or found in your early days that would go on to influence you throughout the rest of your education and career?
Yeah, for me, it was always around athletics. I mean, there was not a lot going on in Postville, Iowa. We didn't have a movie theater. There was no fast food. We didn't even have a stoplight. We just had a 4-way stop in the middle of town where we would occasionally just park our cars and hang out. That was pretty much the peak social activity. And other than that, we played sports. And so I had an opportunity to have a couple of really meaningful coaches. One, Paul Youngblood, was our Little League coach. He was my basketball coach. And man, when you talk tough love, that was the name of the game with Coach Youngblood. And then I had another coach who was my head football coach, Chris Evers, who really, pushed me to look at the opportunity for college football to be an on-ramp to pursuing higher education, which was always a dream of mine. I've mentioned before that my parents didn't have the opportunity to go to college. And so just going to college, period, was always the dream that we talked about, the goal that we had set, and being fortunate to do well enough academically and athletically, that really started to open up some doors. And my coach encouraged me to, send my VHS tapes to Ivy League schools and to schools that I had never even heard of, in places that I had never thought about traveling to. And I'm really glad that I did, which was ultimately what governed my college choice.
And talk to me about that college choice. Where was it? And tell me about when you arrived there. What was it? Was it different than the Iowa Plains?
Well, other than being in Florida when I was under 2 years old, I had basically never traveled east of Chicago until I was in high school. And I got to go on one trip to Washington, D.C. And other than that, it basically was recruiting trips. And so I remember my first recruiting trip was to Dartmouth, and we flew into Manchester, New Hampshire. And it was basically my first time in the Northeast, first recruiting trip. Went up to Dartmouth, was just blown away by the experience. I remember my host on that recruiting trip was from Long Island. I could not understand anything he said. I was so fresh off the farm, I can't even describe it. And I left that recruiting trip definitely going to Dartmouth. And then there was a recurring, which was pretty much wherever I went, then I was definitely just going there. And given that it wasn't like we had, the dream had been go to college, but it was never, hey, we really want you to be able to go here, or, let's work really hard so you can go there. These schools were not even on the radar. And so once I decided that, pursuing, the Ivy League would be the right combination of athletic sort of level plus academic opportunity, then it was just, me kind of going school to school. I remember going to Princeton and just being blown away by that campus and experience. And then ultimately went to Brown on my last recruiting trip. And I'd be lying if I said the fact that the head football coach happened to have grown up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, didn't have an enormous ultimate impact on my decision. And so I decided to go to Brown, in part because of that. And I felt really comfortable, and, being a long way from home, that was important. But they also had really great language programs. And I'd grown up in a town that, as much as it was surrounded by cornfields in Iowa, there was massive immigration to that town. We had the largest kosher meat packing plant in the country. We had immigrants from all over the world who sort of descended upon this town in the early 90s. And so I got super involved with the Mexican community. I was, very involved sort of in Spanish, both at school and outside of school. And so being able to pursue languages at Brown was exciting as well. And so ultimately, on a whim, made the decision to go to Brown, and haven't really looked back.
I do want the audience to know that Postville, Iowa is known as the hometown to the world.
Hometown of the world. That's right.
Yeah, a very diverse community of rich in industry and culture. So,
right.
Which I'm sure is what you found when you arrived there in the boiling pot of Providence, which to its own right is filled with so many different communities and cultures there. So tell me, what was the life at Brown like? How were you able to balance your studies with your athletics? I know you've told me, which I feel is just a great story, some really colorful stories about early employers for whom you wrote ads in Portuguese and different sort of marketing materials in different languages. So talk to me about Brown, and talk to me about your extracurriculars.
Well, look, I was always hustling for a buck. I was fortunate to get some great philanthropic support from Brown, but that only goes so far. And so I was always looking for an extra buck, and I found some listing I think it was in the Portuguese department, the Brazilian and Portuguese studies department, where there was an immigration lawyer who was seeking help translating with his clients, both written, basically articles that he was putting out in the local Portuguese language newspaper, and then in actually working through immigration documentation with some of his clients. And I figured that I had spent a lot of time with the immigrant community in Iowa, and I really wanted to learn Portuguese better. And so I applied for the job, maybe a semester into Portuguese, quite fluent in Spanish at the time, but but I basically started writing articles about Portuguese or about Brazilian immigration in Portuguese, and then I would turn those articles in as papers, and I would have my my Portuguese teacher basically proof my my newspaper articles, which I would then publish and get paid for. So it was a really good intersection
A
of
real one hand wash the other there.
applied learning is
Very
what I
good.
call it.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, the real world experience there.
Yeah.
So that's pretty fascinating. And as you were in those, whether it be Portuguese or Spanish classes in your language classes, who are some of the sorts of people you met? And as a first generation college student, how did that shape your experience? And did you kind of find like-minded people that shared a similar experience with you?
Well, the best part about language classes is that you are constantly talking to the other students, right? When you think about most classes in college, sure, there might be section breakouts and so forth, but typically people might partner up with friends or teammates and just kind of work through things as a small group. Whereas in the language classes, you're forced to speak with people. And there was such a diverse population of people from all walks of life at Brown. But candidly, being on the football team with 100 friends built in the first week of school, I did not have to work as hard as other students did to find their place and build their communities. And so the language classes were a real blessing because it forced me to meet people who I otherwise might have never had the opportunity to converse with. And that was a really great experience. And then ultimately, outside of football, I did have the opportunity to join the senior class board, and that was really just a neat opportunity to kind of break out of my typical social circles and get to know people who are still friends to this day, and really kind of plan some of the big senior class activities together.
That's great. And again, just for the recurring theme, I'm sure you met a bunch of really interesting people there that helped you from that pivotal place in your life, kind of boost you into your career. But any folks that you'd like to highlight as mentors or kind of leaders that made an impact on you then?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the great parts of being a part of the football program is that there was a built-in community, and they really were at that time. There were a handful of leaders that were working to build out mentoring programs and really do more career support to connect alumni from the football program with the current student athletes. And one, that was a way to, I think, support retention and keeping people, in the program, but also deliver on the promise that everybody sold, on that recruiting trip about access to opportunities. And that was something that I really just embraced, given the kind of family background and the fact that I didn't have a lot of connections or relationships or really understand what career paths were possible. And so I was super fortunate to have an alumnus named John Skinner, who I met at one of our mentoring events that we did, who just took me under his wing and really helped me start to understand, hey, you're studying Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian. You've got this international relations background. How does that translate to a job, right? There's not necessarily a whole bunch of entry-level jobs that are looking for that exact skill set, or at least that's what I thought. And he introduced really the idea of spending a couple years in business, building some fundamental business skills, such that I would then have an opportunity to explore a whole host of career paths beyond that. And he strongly encouraged that I check out both the investment banking world and the consulting world, both of which I knew absolutely nothing about. And I was like this piece of clay that he molded into a passable sort of interviewee in the investment banking world, which ultimately led me to get an opportunity at Lehman Brothers. And then there was an opportunity at a firm in Chicago called William Blair and Company, which I'd never heard of. I'd of course heard of Lehman Brothers, but I ended up going out to Chicago, feeling enough Midwestern connection that it just seemed like a better fit for me. In the spirit of first, my first time in New York City, my first time in Times Square was going to my interview at Lehman Brothers. And so that's a lot to take in, as a,
It's the pinnacle of culture there. You've got
I probably bought sunglasses, Rolex on my way in.
oh
I
yeah.
was so excited that people were trying to sell me stuff. It was a very poignant experience. And look, ultimately decided to pursue the opportunity in Chicago. Coincidentally, the CEO of William Blair was a Brown alum. One of the folks that was on the investment banking team was a Brown alum. That had not all that much to do with my decision to go there, but it just created, again, some familiarity given how new this whole world was to me. And so I graduated and moved out to Chicago in the summer of 2004.
Well, I think, to the credit of creating community, and then especially those that you establish in your college days, while it's definitely not ever the one reason maybe you choose something, I think the fact that you did have those connections, it speaks to the value of an education, not only your personal one, but that the community it built around you. So glad to hear that there were other Brown folks there at William Blair and Company when you're able to get there. So talk to me about you're this new lump of clay. You're in the investment banking world. What are some lessons you're learning, and then how does that catapult you to the next stage of your education? Because this is not the last stop on your education journey.
I showed up at William Blair and Company the first day and was such an eager beaver. I remember that at the security desk, there was another first year analyst who was checking in next to me. And I basically was like, "Hi, want to be my best friend?" And he was like, "Yes." And that was Ahad Khan, who actually went on to become a groomsman in my wedding and vice versa. And it was just like this moment of, I knew no one. It was like everybody was a new potential friend. And at the same time, the work was incredibly humbling. I mean, I was so unprepared to do the financial analysis, to do the Excel modeling. I mean, my skills translating Portuguese in a mediocre fashion were just not that applicable to the first year analyst curriculum. And so it was a super humbling experience. And I did, try to fake it until I made it. But I had a couple of great mentors there who, again, sort of saw something and were willing to go above and beyond. Even my office mate. I mean, basically we were paired with, I had a second year analyst paired with me. His name was Brian Doherty, and he had gone to Villanova and he'd studied finance, and he was just so prepared for this work. I was completely unprepared, but he was willing to help me out. And that was just a recurring theme of, mentors not only being years ahead of me, but even that, the mentor who was 1 year ahead of me, playing a big role. And I'm grateful to Brian and remain friends to this day. And ultimately, I was thrown into this world where I had never even thought about the word MBA. I'm not sure that I knew what an MBA was, even when I graduated from college. And every single person that was in a senior leadership position at William Blair had an MBA. And I had never thought of the word private equity before, but either staying on investment banking or pursuing roles in private equity was kind of the common career path after a couple of years. And I didn't even know what private equity was. If you don't really know what it was and you're listening, it's very simple. Investment banking is like being a real estate agent. Private equity is like buying the house, and that's the difference. And so I went on to have an opportunity to work at the largest private equity fund in Chicago called Madison Dearborn Partners. The CEO, one of the co-CEOs, was a Brown alum and trustee. The other co-CEO was the president of the Harvard Alumni Association. And so they were just deeply connected to their respective alma maters. And that was another just incredibly challenging but extremely valuable moment in my career. And again, everybody there that had advanced into a leadership role had an MBA. And so all of a sudden I was applying to MBA programs and learning what that was all about and trying to get recommendation letters, and ultimately applied to Harvard, Wharton, and Stanford, and got into Harvard and Wharton, and decided to go to Harvard Business School and started there in the fall of 2008, pretty much the moment that Lehman Brothers was collapsing and that the financial crisis was underway. And so I had an opportunity to sort of watch from the sidelines during what was, a really challenging period for a lot of my former colleagues.
Well, that's, they say that in times of great disruption, that's where innovation can often be bred.
Yeah.
So you are now at Harvard, you're studying at HBS, and you are asked by Brown to help with some of their fundraising efforts. So,
Right.
this is all, I'm insinuating where this is going, but something tells me this was not the greatest experience and may have given you some sort of spark of genius during your business school days.
Well, look, outside of work in Chicago, I'd gotten very involved with the local Brown club, and I just basically worked and I did stuff with the Brown community, and it was a great experience. And uh, uh, when I got out to HBS, my fifth reunion was right around the corner, and there was a woman named Sarah Santos who came from the Brown development office and met with me and handed me a packet and said, "Hey, look, like, would you be willing to get involved with your reunion campaign?" And I said yes, and the process that followed really introduced me to this world of fundraising. And I got a spreadsheet from their database, and it was, class of 2004, and they had people listed in alphabetical order. And it was clear that most of the information was out of date. This was during a really tumultuous time in the job market, and so it just was a struggle to sort of A, work in a spreadsheet, and B, get the information that I needed to do my job successfully. At the same time, I loved the process. Like, I loved the fundraising. I loved securing the gift. I loved being involved with the reunion experience, even though it was really challenging. And so for whatever reason, I came back, for my second year of business school, just wanting to know more about this world of alumni engagement and development. It had really shaped my entire career path, right? From, having the opportunity to go to Brown thanks to philanthropic support, to having mentors from the Brown Football Association, to getting involved in the Brown Club of Chicago. And all along the way, I was getting PDFs and Excel sheets of largely inaccurate information. And this was at a moment when, it's 2009, 2010. Yes, the financial crisis is going on, but there's a ton of innovation. Social media is exploding. Mobile applications,
Smartphone, iPhone,
right?
2007, right?
So I remember being in a one of our case discussions at Harvard, adamantly defending why BlackBerry would dominate the mobile phone landscape for years to come. So I was way off on that call. But that's just a moment in time where we were just on the cusp of Apple and Android really overtaking the BlackBerry. And with that, the whole app ecosystem was emerging. And it just seemed like as other sectors were being reinvented at the intersection of social and mobile, why wasn't this world of education fundraising that, helped kids like me go to college? And so I continued to dig and learn about the systems and the sector, and interviewed a bunch of people that worked in the space, and everyone cited a pretty depressing technology landscape that was a decade or two behind, and not a single person indicated that, no, there's no problem to be solved here. Every single person was excited about the opportunity to start to connect the dots between social media platforms and donor databases, to start to deliver experiences in native mobile work that would be commensurate with what we were experiencing in our consumer lives. And so I just decided to throw my hat in the ring with our business school competition, with our entrepreneurship competition. And I remember getting my scorecard from the judges, and one of the judges worked at a really respected fund in Boston called Polaris Ventures, and he wrote on my scorecard, "I would invest." And I was like, "What? Invest in what? This PowerPoint that I just talked about for 10 minutes? And I remember following up with him. His name was Bob Guyman, and meeting up with him. And he was like, "Yeah, this is how venture capitalists invest. Like, we hear a good idea and then we offer money." I'm like, "That is crazy." He ultimately did not invest, just to be totally clear. But it was enough.
If you're listening.
Yeah, Bob, if you're out there. But it was enough of a spark to encourage me to give it a shot. And I decided to start a company. I named it EverTrue after Brown's fight song, EverTrue to Brown. And we got off to the races.
That's great. I'm also sensing this theme, which if anyone caught my interview with you, sensing a similar theme that binds us is just because you have a lack of information at the onset does not stop you from starting the journey, which I think is just a very
Helps.
strong
It helps
story to
take the
tell.
first step, right? Like if I had all the information, I might not have done it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sometimes knowing too much is the enemy of getting going.
But in the spirit of mentorship, though, there was really a pivotal moment that when you think about those back to the future inflection points where, if this happens on, October 8th, 1888 or whatever, it's like that was this inflection point. There was a conference at HBS right after I graduated, and I had a classmate help me create a basic website, but there was really nothing to it. And there was a conference where basically all of the leading venture capitalists from the East Coast were coming together. It was called Venture Summit East, and all the kind of who's who entrepreneurs in Boston were going to be there. And I remember seeing a sign for it, seeing all these people who were going to be there and wanting to go so bad, but it was $2,000 to attend, and that was not going to happen. So I reached out to the organizer and I basically gave him my story. I'm a recent grad. I'm in the early innings of starting a company. Do you need any volunteers for this conference? And he's like, sure, you can come work the registration desk. And so I went, and then when people aren't registering, you can go and listen in to these sessions. And so I worked the registration desk, basically sneak my way into this conference. And at lunch, where I'm surrounded by all of these people who are the who's who of venture and entrepreneurship, I happened to sit down next to Jeff Busking, who is both a sort of investor in residence, if you will, at HBS, but he was also a venture capitalist at Flybridge in Boston. And I had gotten to know him as a student. So he was like the one person at this whole conference that I knew. I sat next to him and he introduced me to two people, Walt Doyle and Scott Kurzner. I had no idea who either one of them was, but Walt was this incredibly dynamic guy who apparently had just, he had taken over as CEO of this company Where that was growing really fast. And it was one of the first like consumer mobile startups in Boston. And he was just an unbelievably charismatic guy. And he wanted to know all about my story. And this other guy, Scott Kurzner, is on the other side of the table taking notes the whole time. And I'm like, why is this guy taking notes about my conversation with Walt? Long story short, Scott is the lead reporter for the innovation economy at the Boston Globe. And the next day, he basically publishes a story about EverTrue, this new startup from Harvard Business School. And there was nothing to it. And
oh my gosh,
the story, people start applying for jobs. I've got accountants reaching out who want to help me with my books. I'm like, there are no books here, people. But it created, it just made it more real, right? There are these inflection points where if that article doesn't get published, it's less real. I'm less committed. And at the same time, Walt followed up and he said, hey, look, I just moved into this great office space in the North End. Come work out of this space, get out of your apartment. And so I started going down to the North End, the most quintessential like tech startup, brick and beam, cool space, people riding around on skateboards. And I had no idea what any of these roles were, what the company did, but I'm like, this is amazing. I felt like I was at Google, right? Or how you would picture that sort of quintessential startup experience. And I got to sit in an office, basically watching this company hit its rocket ship inflection point. They were hiring people constantly. There were press coming in. Venture capitalists were coming in to meet Walt, and then he would kick them over to say hello to me. And it was just this, I mean, there's no chance we're on this podcast right now if Walt hadn't given me that desk for whatever reason, which wouldn't have happened if I hadn't volunteered to work the registration desk. And so at those early stages of the entrepreneurial journey, it's just amazing how these little inflection points really do shape your entire trajectory. And I'm sure you have those moments as well. But long story short, Walt supported our application to the Techstars Accelerator. Other than Y Combinator, Techstars is considered sort of the leading accelerator. That whole program is about mentorship, where they basically take early stage founding teams, surround them with tried and true experienced mentors, and let good things happen. And so Walt's mentorship led to the mentorship in Techstars, Katie Ray, Reed Sturdivant, all of these people who then became my mentors ended up investing in the company, making referrals to our early candidates. I mean, it's just amazing how one thing leads to another. And ultimately, here we are just over 10 years later.
I love that. That's such an amazing story. And this Walt guy sounds like an amazing person on top of an absolute treasure trove of people you've been mentioning. So that's such wonderful story to hear. So now let's fast forward. You're in this space. You're entering this new world. You're meeting with venture capitalists. You're starting a team. Whether people are sending you in something from the Boston Globe or the Boston Insider,
Boston Globe, yeah,
Boston Globe. You're getting kind of inundated, but you start to assemble a team. Tell me about that early team, and then tell me how'd you go out? How'd you start drumming up business, and who was that first customer? So, compound question.
I'm almost getting embarrassed about how much luck is sort of involved.
Luck is everything. Luck is everything.
Look, so founding team, right? As great as it was to meet Walt, I was meeting venture capitalists, and I basically was saying, hey, look, I've got this idea. Here's my backstory. I've got this idea for a mobile application that would be kind of a V1 product. And they would all say, well, who's your CTO or who's your technical co-founder? Are you going to build this? And I'm like, no, that's why I need your venture capital money. So I can then go and hire that CTO to go build it. And they're like, no. Like, we want to see the CTO before we're going to give you the money. So I was in this chicken and the egg problem, because then I'm out meeting CTOs. They're like, well, how are you going to pay me? Well, once you join, then I'll be able to get the venture capitalist. And like, all right, sounds cool. Come back to me when you're further along. And so, long story short, I met up with, I went to this iPhone developers meetup at the Asgard, which is a bar in Central Square. And I basically, they call on people, or they let people at the beginning do their elevator pitch. So I stood there with my phone in this prototype app that had been built by an offshore team. And I'm like, I'm Brent. This is my story. This is what I'm doing. And this guy came up to me afterwards, which I was super excited about, who's like, I am an iPhone developer. And I'm like, that's amazing. And then he said, I'm not interested in working on this project with you, which was a little soul crushing. But then he said, I've got a friend who is looking for his next thing that you should meet. So I walk over to the other side of the bar, and this guy who, I'm 6'2", he's 6'5", just chowing down chicken wings, basically gives me a fist pound because of all the chicken wings that he's dealing with, and is like, I'm Eric. And I go on to learn his story. He had just finished a stint as a product manager at a business intelligence startup. But he had also just finished his MBA the year before at Boston University. And he had gotten really involved with the entrepreneurship program at BU and had studied at Rochester Institute of Technology undergrad. And so he had this real intersection of having been a software developer at a variety of startups. Some had done well, some had really struggled, and then had also transitioned in more of a product management role by way of his work in the BU entrepreneurship community. And so we hit it off, and it was enough where he was looking for something new, and he had a high risk tolerance to start something early. And I was looking for somebody that had his skill set that might help break that chicken and the egg problem. And so we spent about a month founder dating, where we would actually go and meet up at an old, at one of the office spaces at Harvard, because it was halfway between where I lived and where he lived in Arlington. And we would whiteboard things, and then we would, get on video chats together, and ultimately decided to go on a road trip to his alma mater, RIT, and run some proof of concept and by the alumni team there. And on that trip, we got 2 speeding tickets. We had no money in the bank, and we got 2 speeding tickets. We stopped at RIT, we stopped at Cornell on the way back, and came back to Boston. And at that point, we decided we're working pretty well together. We've got a good rapport. And there's clearly a market opportunity based on all the feedback that we'd received. And so we, on a whiteboard at HBS, basically, hand shook on a co-founding agreement. And that's like the number one way to not go meet a co-founder that you're going to spend years building a company with. You don't go like I met a guy at a bar and we decided to partner up together.
A lot, a lot of life stories start that way,
right? So it was just like not the like you want, right? What do they want to know? Is this a team that has a rapport, that has a track record, relationships when the going gets tough? How are they going to get through things together? We had none of that. But we did have a genuinely authentic connection. Eric's an amazing human, and we just got after it together. And he basically took this free course that Stanford had just released about how to become an iPhone developer, and he taught himself how to code in iOS, which was brand new at that time, and started rebuilding the prototype application. And then with that, we were able to go to Techstars, and now instead of it just being eager Brent without the technical partner, they're like, okay, this is a solid team. Like, this is what we're looking for. That broke the cycle. We got into Techstars, and then basically he was building, I was selling, and in part, on the way, we got connected with our third co-founder, Jesse Bardo, where I basically went to a trade show, and again, basically snuck into the trade show. And instead of having my own booth, I stood at the edge of someone else's booth. And in doing that, I met a whole bunch of other vendors, including Jesse. And he was a passionate, young alumnus from Andover and Wesleyan. And he was fired up about what we were doing and was social media consulting for schools and decided to get on board. And so it was just another example of, happened to go to this conference, happened to borrow the edge of a booth, happened to meet somebody who happened to go on and become, a pivotal part of our team, and a cultural just foundation that still persists to this day. And so yeah, I mean, those early days, it's just putting yourself out there and being ready for opportunity, but not over engineering it, because nothing that I just described to you was planned. It all just sort of happened, and you got to embrace it. And yeah, those are some of the most just amazing memories to think about as we now bring our teams together today. Even like the culture and the way that we treat each other and how we communicate. I mean, so much of that is formed in the earliest moments, and that's the stuff that's almost impossible, to change. It's easy to change your product or your strategy, but the cultural components really persist.
Again, I just love the story, and it always gives me goosebumps going back to those early days where when you really think about it, you're like, how in the world did those dots all connect to get us to this fantastic mountaintop that we're at today? But so you've now got this team, you're out pitching. What are those? How do you start picking up steam, and what do you find about the higher ed market? What are you finding that you really love? What are you finding that might still be challenging? Kind of tell me the path you find yourself on.
Well, I would say that early on, we were very solution focused instead of problem focused. So like we had an idea for the app, what the V1 app would do. And it was like, let's build the app, let's sell the app. And we sort of took for granted that we really understood the industry, that we really understood the pain points. And I'm sure that if we had spent a little more time just getting to know the different roles and getting to know the different parts of an advancement org and being more thoughtful about really what are your pain points, that would have pointed us in a different direction, even though we would have stayed focused on the sector. And so we did pick a problem, and there was a problem there. But we really ran after that without fully understanding the breadth of the opportunity in the space. And so long story short, we did have a good V1 product, a mobile application focused on basically creating a Yelp for alumni, right? Like, take the old print directory, put it on your phone, make it easy to use. And the reception, like people were excited, right? This was the moment when like, there's an app for that was the big ad campaign. And it was like, our sales pitch was like, there's an app for this. And people, we were able to draft just the broader momentum of the App Store. And in doing that, just in the spirit of like how these things connect, I remember at this moment, all of the lead requests came to my inbox, right? We had the HubSpot marketing system, but all of the leads came right to me. And one Saturday morning, I got a lead from a school in Utah. And there was a guy who basically was like, I'm on the board at this school in Utah. I would like to learn more about your product. And for whatever reason, I looked this guy up, and he was like the president of Ticketmaster, and he had this like really, really strong entrepreneurial background. And I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, I'm happy to do the demo for the school, but also I'd love to meet with you one-on-one, either via phone, or if you're ever in Boston, let me know." He's like, "I'll be in Boston on Friday. I'm visiting my son at Exeter. I'll come by your office." And so he comes by my office. His name's Tom Stockham, amazing entrepreneur out in Utah. Take him through my story. And he's like, "Have you ever met the folks at Bain Capital Ventures?" I'm like, I have not. He's like, "Would you like to?" I'm like, "Yes." He makes an introduction to Mike Krupka. I meet this guy, Mike Krupka, who's the managing partner at Bain Capital Ventures, who also had just led his 25th reunion campaign at Dartmouth. And he experienced all the same challenges that I did.
There you go.
He basically immediately leaned in and said, "I'd like to invest in the company." I'm like, "What?" Like, I got a lead for him from a school in Utah, and that just led to my Series A from Bain Capital Ventures. And so there was just, for all the challenges, there's been a lot of really, really good luck along the way.
That's awesome. And, I think as I share with you, working this in this space, especially in higher ed advancement, there are so many amazing people you meet, both as clients and as these connectors and just advisors, whether they be directly at the organizations, whether they be consultants. I guess just again in this theme of mentorship, who, if you had a few, you can't highlight them all because we'd be here all day, but if there were a few relationships you've fostered over those years, who might a few of those be, just to give some sweet shout outs to this audience?
Look, there's a guy named Andy Shandlin early on who was a Brown alum working in the alumni relations space. He was one of the only bloggers in the space. He was really elevating the voice of the sector. And I was fortunate to meet him early on. And then he immediately made an introduction to a guy named Travis Warren, who was running a company called Whipple Hill up in New Hampshire. We ended up partnering with that business. Travis was a great mentor and still is a friend to this day. And then there were just early customers, people like Jim Zimmerman, who was the director of development at the Middlesex School in Concord, Massachusetts, who, just had this deep network of relationships in the independent school fundraising world, which I knew nothing about. And he really took me under his wing. A guy named Bill Kissick, who was running development at St. Paul's School. There's just this great group of practitioners who are personal friends. I mean, that's the one thing about this sector is people are not competing. They are not only colleagues, but they are personal friends. And I was just fortunate to get plugged into this group of friends who, saw something in me and our team and was willing to help point us in the right direction. And so really thinking about even some of those early client relationships where, yes, they were paying us for our service, but they were offering so much more by way of their mentorship and guidance. And some of those folks I'm still in touch with to this day. And it's amazing to think about the impact that they had on our early trajectory.
Well, great shout out to all those folks. And I'm sure there's, with your Rolodex and the relationships you've built, you could literally be here all day telling great stories about every single client and prospective client that there is out there. So there will be more podcasts in the future for that. So, not to fast forward too far in the future, but here we are. It's 2022. ThankView and EverTrue, we have joined forces, bringing, I think, this industry in a new and exciting trajectory. Tell me, what are you excited about as we come together? As you think about the future ahead, what are things that get you really jazzed up? And what would you like the audience to know?
Well, as we went through the merger process, JD, a couple of times we would use the expression, "It feels like we're co-founding a new company," and that is what it feels like. It's the best of all worlds in my mind, because we aren't totally green, brand new entrepreneurs who really know nothing, but are just going to relentlessly will something into existence. Like, we're still going to be relentless, but we've learned a lot about entrepreneurship. We've made a lot of mistakes. We've learned so much about the industry. A lot of the things that I wish I had just sat down and really understood before we did anything, we've been able to learn through osmosis and trial and error over the last decade. And very few entrepreneurs get to work on a company for 10 years. And I have just crossed that mark. You're, rounding the corner on 6 or 7. And we now have an opportunity as a new entity, to bring the best of what your team has learned, what our team has learned, the best of our client relationships, and have some experience under our belts such that we can, I think, really put forth a vision that is much more connected to what the sector really needs. And if we were able to accomplish what we've been able to accomplish, knowing as little as we did, with as few connections as we had, with all of the luck that was required along the way, as long as we don't give up, there is no way we are not going to solve these problems that we've set out to solve with the relationships we have with our customers, with the amazing teams we've developed, with the inbound flow of candidates who are excited about joining us on this mission. As long as we don't give up, as long as we stay persistent, we are going to figure this out. And it is going to be, I think, more and more energizing as we get closer and closer to solving these problems, as we get more connected to the philanthropic outcomes that help kids like me go to college. And it all comes back to the opportunity to really build something at the intersection of social good and philanthropy, while building a really exciting and successful business that will last for decades beyond us. And I've never felt as much conviction or confidence in that. I never would have talked about what's our 2030 vision. I probably wouldn't have said that 2 years ago, because it was like, how are we going to get to 2020? And it was all hands on deck just to get to this milestone. But now I feel like we're in a spot with the scale and the support from our investors and our team to really start thinking much bigger, and to start thinking about 10 years ahead and how we're going to shape the company and the strategy and the team today to get there.
We'll still love those happy accidents as they come, but to your point, I think we have a lot of foundation underneath us to guide us in the right direction, and amazing support from both our teams and partners. So I share that sentiment. And the most important question, maybe for some slice of the audience: are you hiring?
We are. In fact, this is wild. So it is January 19th. And on Monday, I did a call with Gail, who's our chief people officer and was featured on the Raise podcast. And we had 7 people start just on Monday, which was exciting and terrifying at the same time. But we do have big growth expectations. And I will say that we've just been blown away by the talent pool. We've leaned heavily into remote work, being able to create opportunities to connect with the best professionals who are passionate about what we're passionate about, that have the skills that we need. It's been incredibly liberating, and I'm super excited. So yeah, check out the careers page. And if there's nothing on the careers page that maps to your skills or interests, shoot us an email. I'm Brent@EverTrue.com, JD@ThankView.com. Let us know what you're excited about, what you're passionate about. If you're a customer of ours, things that you see us doing poorly or things that you think we could do better, don't be shy. Let us know. And crazier things have happened.
If your story has taught us anything, it's always take the chance. Shoot that email, knock on that door, volunteer at that event. That's the first step in the right direction towards anything. Well, Brent, you've proven just as professional on this side of the microphone as the host side of the microphone. I will begrudgingly give you back the mantle as host of the Raise podcast, but it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you, getting to know you better and getting to know your story, and certainly be able to share that with this entire audience. So thank you for your time.
JD, thanks for coming in and pinch hitting here. I actually did not know this was happening. I had seen that we had a recording schedule, but I didn't really realize that I was going to be the guest. So
there you go. You're good off the cuff. So
nicely done.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
With that, Brent signing off with today's guest, me, from Narragansett, Rhode Island. Take care, everybody. See you out there.